today we're going to talk about how to transform your idea into a business. Um, in case you guys don't know me, I'm going to just briefly go over who I am. So my name is Phoebe Kunitomi. I am 30 years old, so a little bit older than all of you. I I started my own company, Oko, which is a minimalist bodywear brand for women. We are both a direct-to-consumer and a wholesale business. I started this business in 2018 when I was pursuing my MBA at Wharton. But my entire life, I always knew that I wanted to start my own business, and I think that I tried to build a career and get the right experiences to get me to where I am today. So I don't know if you can see on the slide, but I've always worked at startups at various stages of maturity. Um, After graduating for Georgetown as my undergrad, I went to a boutique consulting firm called Promontory Financial Group. I did the typical consulting lifestyle. I hated it. It was terrible. I was traveling all the time. I never really got to stay in one place or stay with one client and see our recommendations implemented. So I became chief of staff at that consulting firm, where I oversaw, among other things, the acquisition of that firm by IBM. I think this was just a really great way to get operations experience and strategy experience at a more mature startup, especially when I was in my early 20s at that time. After Promontory was acquired by IBM, I knew that I didn't want to work for a company the size of a big city, a medium-sized city in the US. So I went to Merlon Intelligence, where I joined as a second employee. And for the people who are interested in STEM, Merlon is actually a machine learning startup that tries to use like artificial intelligence to stop money laundering and financial crime moving through our banking system. So it's a very, very cool place to work. I came in very early and I got a ton of experience from like the nitty gritty stuff to the really strategic, high level strategic stuff about how to start a company. And then I went to Wharton, and that's where I founded Oko. I actually worked on Oko and Merlon for my first year at business school. And then I decided that it was a little bit too much trying to juggle two jobs and school. So I now work at Oko full time. So that's a little bit about me, but I want to hear a little bit about yourself. So in the chat, can you just put the letter that you fall under? So, A is whether or not you already have your own business. B is, I know I want to start a business, but maybe just have a few ideas that I'm floating around now. And C is just, I'm here to learn. Let me see. Oh, exciting. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I I intentionally chose these categories because you might think that A is the only category that would be considered somebody who is an entrepreneur. But the fact is that if you're in A, B, or C, I would consider you an entrepreneur. Like if you are thinking about starting your business, just here to learn or just here to learn, like that to me is somebody who has an entrepreneurial spirit, which I'll get into at the end of this presentation. So you're on the right track, whether or not you want to own your own business one day or just work at one. Okay, so now, another quiz for you all is when you hear the word entrepreneur, what comes to mind? It could be specific examples of people, personality traits of people, whatever it comes to mind when you think of somebody who is an entrepreneur. And you could type that in the chat. Okay, no one's typing anything. I can get good. That's great. Wow, these are very practical. I like this. You guys are way more practical than some of my peers are, for sure. I like that. Great communicators. Definitely an important thing. Risk takers is good. Amazing. Okay. I like all of these. Um, I Wow, you guys are all really so smart. This is incredible. So all of these ideas are definitely true and not wrong. But I want to start off our workshop today with kind of debunking 3 myths when it comes to um, how our society thinks or establishes norms with regard to who an entrepreneur is or what an entrepreneur does. So I don't know if you recognize the gentleman here on the screen, but it is Elon Musk's. And one of the common myths is that good ideas come from bolts of insights and visionary geniuses. Uh, that's a common myth. You probably think of, let's say, Steve Jobs as falling in this bucket. Elizabeth Holmes, who started Theranos and is now facing fraud allegations, is part of this bucket too. You think as entrepreneurs as the big splashy guys and women who are completely changing the world as we see it, and as innovators, which is certainly true, but it's a myth that I want to go into. One of you said something about risk takers. So another myth is that entrepreneurs are cavalier risk takers, that they are, they don't have any inhibitions, that they're just willing to go all the way and take on risks that other people who would not be, who are in, let's say, normal 9-to-5 jobs wouldn't. Um, that's a second myth that's common, and some of you mentioned it. And then finally, one thing that really frustrates me about what I see in the startup community is that the best startups are those startups who have business ideas and business concepts that are fully baked from the launch. That they, suddenly this company appears and it's wildly successful, and there's that. But that's certainly not true. And I want you to keep these 3 myths in mind as you think about, your own entrepreneurial journey and starting to create your own business and business plan, because you do not have to fall in any of these buckets or all of these buckets to become a successful business owner. And this is why. So I think that the very best ideas actually come from knowledge and need, and a very, very clear understanding of what that need is too. The second piece of truth is that the best entrepreneurs actually are the ones who are the best at reducing their risks. They're not the ones who are completely unafraid to take risks. Because there is so much uncertainty in starting a startup, you actually are going to be better off if you are more cognizant of the decisions you're making and the impacts that they would have on your business from the very beginning. And then the third truth is that the best ideas are actually accumulation of small experiments over time. So you're constantly trying to innovate, not on a very large scale, but at very small steps over time, and get smarter and smarter about creating the best product or creating the best service or software for your market. And I wanted to start off this conversation with this is because for this roadmap that I prepared, it's super high level about, this journey from creating your idea to creating a growing, profitable company. Is that the very first step, of course, is that you want to have an idea. And when it comes to creating an idea, hold on. When it comes to, let me backtrack. I'll get that to the next slide. So first you create an idea, then you analyze that idea a lot, and we'll get into that. Then you go, okay, maybe this idea has legs. Maybe it's time to build a company around this idea, build people and a team. And then once you build a company, you launch, you have, sales under your belt, or you have the right number of subscribers if you're a tech company. Oh, weird, there's red dots popping all over my presentation. And then you go to scale. And this is like a very rudimentary, simplistic roadmap that I put together about launching and building a company. But I think it'll give you enough of a framework to really think about how you would take your idea in step 1 over here and build it along to come to step 2 here to scale it into a growing, profitable company. Let me see 1 second. Okay. So the first thing is, where do I find an idea? I am showing you right now a underwear drawer that is very messy with very old and yucky looking underwear for a reason. Because I'm gonna speak to this concept through my own experience with Oko. So, Oko is a minimalist bodywear brand. That means that all of our pieces are very comfortable. They're really versatile because I wanted to declutter women's top drawers. I thought that, at least for people that I knew, no one was truly happy with their underwear, when no one was truly happy with their bras. I'm sure you guys have a few pairs of underwear that you like to wear, and then other ones that just sit in your drawer and that you never want to wear. And I wanted to figure out why that problem existed. But this idea didn't come to me just out of the blue, or I was just, walking down the street one day. It actually came out of a very acute need, and a very personal need. I had, this outfit I wanted to wear, and every pair of underwear I owned showed through it. It was that simple. But I couldn't get it out of my head. And what I did is that, look, like, I always knew that I wanted to become an entrepreneur. So I kept a journal. I kept a journal of ideas that would come to me on the fly. Maybe it would come to me during class or during work, or through conversation with my friends, of things that could potentially one day become a business idea, including the idea that kind of founded Oko. And I wrote that down in a journal. It is that simple. So my suggestion to all of you is, like, okay, if you have an idea, which a lot of you seem to have, is that you must write it down. And I mean, like, physically write it down, because there's some, like, psychological benefits to actually memorizing things and being able to flesh things out. Write it down, and don't let that idea go, and keep on accumulating a million ideas. For all the million ideas that you do write down, one might be an idea that you actually could transform into a company, and you never know which one that is. That happened to me with Oko. After this experience with my outfit, that, like, I couldn't find a pair of underwear that I wanted to wear. I literally wrote it down, and then I couldn't get this idea out of my head for, like, over a month, I think. And that's when I knew that I was like, okay, maybe I should start putting some more thought and energy into seeing whether or not this idea warrants becoming a company and building a brand around. Yeah, so this is the very first part. This is actually the most fun part, because you literally shouldn't be inhibited by anything. Like, keep your imagination there is no limit to it. So keep on trying to think of things that would that you think are interesting and one day could potentially be crazy successful companies. Okay. So once you do have an idea and you say, hey, okay, I want to see whether or not this idea has legs and should become a company. Should I pursue it? Should I start finding investors to grow the company, to build a brand, to create a name, all that stuff, or to create a technology product? Because I know a lot of you are interested in technology. But the second step is to analyze. And this probably, in terms of the time and energy where you should put your attention the most, this is a step that you should definitely put your attention the most. It is the most analytical. It's probably the most resource intensive in terms of, like, your time. But it actually will create the foundational base upon which you would build a real company from. So the first question to address is, does this idea seem feasible? So what I did for Oko on this first question is that I actually interviewed, I think it was over 100 women at the time. And I asked them, I had this, like, standard list of questions, and I asked them things like, okay, where do you currently buy your bras? Where do you currently buy your underwear? How often do you buy your bras and underwear? What do you like about the bras you like? What don't you like about the underwear you like or don't like? All those kinds of things. And I standardized all of those responses into a gigantic spreadsheet. I also did a ton of competitive analysis, meaning I like, bought a bunch of other products, saw what I liked, saw where I thought there could be improvements. And, this took me, I think, 6 months to do. Another way that you can test whether or not an idea can be feasible, and a lot of my peers at Wharton did this, who also launched consumer product companies, is that they ran Instagram and Facebook test ads. So it is very easy to create a Facebook business manager account, which is basically a Facebook ad account. And if you have an idea, okay, let's say you want to create a new pair of jeans, right? And you had like two options for the jeans. Maybe one option for the jean had rips in it, and another option for the jean didn't have rips in it. What you could do through a platform like Facebook for very cheaply is you can run a set of ads, one showing the jeans with rips, one showing the jeans um, without rips, and then see which ad actually gets more clicks. So you can actually get hard data against what product or what message or even what brand color that you want to use would work. Um, and I'm looking right here. Shreya says the best way to address this step was to read books based on my idea. I think yes, reading is also a great way to get started. My second thing is my counter to that is like you definitely want to get market data for your idea. So yes, reading might inspire the idea, which would be the first step that you would write down. But then do we really want to get to the crux of, does this idea seem feasible? And so you do things like what I did, which was did a bunch of market research. You can run Facebook ads. You can talk to other people who are experts in the industry and present your idea very conversationally. I mean, people love to speak to women in STEM or just women in general, especially young budding entrepreneurs like all of you are. But you don't want to solely base your idea just on reading, although that is definitely the core of how you inform what your idea will be. So let's pretend that you gather enough market research, you say, okay, this could work, right? But then the whole point of business is that you make money from a business. So you want to make sure that you can actually monetize your business model. Um, and so that means setting up a business plan, which is the second question I have right here. How will you make money? Now, I know that a lot of particularly software and technology companies from the outset, they are running market share strategies as opposed to revenue generating strategies. What I mean by that is that you see like an app like Venmo, for example. Venmo released and they did not charge anything to their users. What they did was try to get as many users up front, but then monetize the business, then start charging for some of their services. And that is a strategy, and that's a totally fine strategy that you should consider. As a consumer product company with Oko, I couldn't go out and give a bunch of underwear and bras out for free because that would be definitely a gigantic shock, by a gigantic cost for me, and it just that's just not how fashion companies work, right? You buy something and you get something in return. You rarely ever get something just for free. Um, so I knew that from the outset, I needed to have a, a path to revenues at the very outset of our website launch. For us, that was like how I was going to make money was through a direct to consumer route, so selling to people like yourselves on our website. But I also have a wholesale line of business where I sell to other retailers, mostly brick and mortar, like clothing companies, who in turn sell our product to their customers. And I knew from the outset that was the two ways I was going to make money. This is something to keep in mind. I think that you guys are at the stage now where you don't need to necessarily define this perfectly from the outset. You could always have one hypothesis about what your business model, your path to revenue will be, and then it can always change over time. You have to be flexible in that regard, but yeah, you need to figure out a way to make money. How did I find people to interview? Oh, so I'm gonna go. I'm gonna address Lorena's question before I move on. This is a great question. The first general comment I have to make is that in general, you cannot be afraid to ask. One of my female mentors, who's like a few decades older than me and much more senior than me at my old firm Promontory, what she said was, because when I first started my career, I was in like 21 or 22. She said that, Phoebe, you're very smart, but you're very timid. You're not afraid to speak up. So what she said is like, as women, we always have to just ask and don't be afraid to ask. So that's my general comment. It's like, okay, don't be afraid to ask people to interview. In terms of like defining the scope of your interview list, you definitely have to think about like what kind of product you're offering, what kind of market you want to break into, who's your ideal customer. For us, I knew I wanted to speak to women across the size spectrum because Oko goes from extra small slash small through 2XL. So I wanted to make sure I captured all of those women's needs in terms of body types. And then I also knew that I wanted to capture um, different, I guess, lifestyles. Like, some people lived in big cities, some people didn't live in big cities, and I wanted to make sure I got a good cross section of that. And then finally, I also wanted to capture women who weren't just all white collar professionals who went to schools like me at Georgetown or at Wharton. I wanted to capture women all across the socioeconomic spectrum as well, because I wanted to offer a product that was reasonably priced and fairly accessible to all. Um, and the first people, so I knew that all of these dimensions I wanted to hit. And the first people I went to are people in my network, people I used to work with, people I went to school with, friends I've known since I was really young. And then I interviewed those like first degree connections. And then I asked them for references for people to interview. So it kind of just like went out for a treat. And, most people want to help you. You just got to ask for the help. Um, yeah. And okay, so, but please keep sending me you guys questions. I'm going to go to the next bullet here though. About like in this analysis phase, you must complete a competitive analysis. And I alluded to this before about me purchasing competitors' products and seeing what I liked and what I didn't like about each of one of those and what I wanted to create that was better from all of those. That is very easy to do in the direct to consumer space, particularly for consumer products, because you could just go online and buy things and send them to your home. But understanding your competitors is just equally as important in the B2B space. So B2B, I'm sorry, is business to business. So for example, when I worked at Merlon, the machine learning startup, we sold to financial institutions. So that's a business to business type of business startup. This competitive analysis is also just as important. You might not be able to go order, an enterprise software platform from the internet to test out. However, what you can do is you can do a ton of internet research, especially in the software space. A lot of these companies are VC backed, meaning that every time there is a funding round, every time they raise more money, there's usually a press release tied to that. So you can just check the press release and, see what the company is about, see what they do, and map out how that particular company is in relation to what you want to do. Literally draw it out. And no, my undergrad study was in international economics, but I went to Wharton for my MBA, so I did get a graduate degree in business. Okay, and I will get Phoebe. Nice name. I will get to your question in the next slide. Okay, so then once you have a very good understanding of what your competitive landscape is, you also want to look into substitutes. So a substitute for Oko would be Victoria's Secret, for example. A substitute for Snapchat might be Instagram stories, for example. You want to understand too, like what other products or services your future customers could switch to, and make sure you're fully aware of the market. And Sandra, I will get to your COVID question at the end. I have 15 minutes for questions, and that's a great question. I would love to talk about that. And then finally, you want to understand what is your business model. This is an extremely loaded question. I took a full semester class on this at Wharton, taught by like a very highly regarded entrepreneurship professor. But in essence, so I won't go into a lot of details here, but in essence, a business model describes how your business will operate. It's not just how your business will make money. It's who are your partners that you're going to use? Who are your vendors that are you going to use? How are you going to manufacture products? How are you going to get them to customers? How are you going to, as I said, make money? What kind of team do you need? All of the different components of how a business works together is your business model. And, hopefully by the end of this analysis phase, you'll have enough data from, understanding your competitors, from understanding the idea of viabilities, from understanding the market generally, that you'll be able to define a business model initially. I think business models change all the time. And I'll give you an example. OCO at the end of last year opened up our own pop-up in LA for a month. I decided to invest and open up our store, albeit for a short period of time, but it still was our own store, because before that, we did a ton of in-person one-off events. We would go to somebody's store, sell OCO, have wine, for a weekend, and we were wildly successful through that. But when I opened up my store, we didn't meet any of our sales targets. It just didn't work in the same way that one-off on-person events worked. And, opening stores was going to be a huge part of my business model. I thought that women wanted to try on their bras or touch the fabric of our underwear in person. I thought that would actually help me acquire new customers, and it didn't. So I had to adjust my business model now, where I'm only purely online when it comes to the direct-to-consumer side of my business. Business models change all the time as companies evolve, but you do want to understand how, at least initially, your business model will work. I'd write it down. I'm a big fan of writing everything down. Okay. Now to Phoebe's question about the manufacturing. The third step in my roadmap, I call it build. So this is when you want to build a company. Everyone thinks that building a company is this. This is when we went to Vietnam to see our first samples and see the factory and make sure everything was produced ethically and according to our quality standards. We took these photos there. And it was a ton of fun. And it was this was such a learning experience for me, because I had only ever worked in consulting or software. So I never actually had to build a product myself from scratch and source manufacturers. It was very, very time consuming. It was extremely also resource intensive, because how particularly Asian manufacturing works is that they have like minimum order quantities. So you need to buy at least a certain amount of units for them to even take any of your business. So for example, I'm making this up. I think, let's say for this thong right here, we had a minimum order quantity of 5,000 units for the cream thong across all sizes. That's a lot of money. And you're right, Phoebe, it is very time consuming. I would say very capital intensive as well. But there are a few things that you can do to build a prototype. And that is, of course, if you're building a product, that's something, a prototype for a consumer product, so something you could touch. In the software world, they call that an MVP, a minimum viable product. So something that could, you hack together and it works at the very baseline level, but doesn't have all the bells and whistles of a final product. So I'm going to use those, try to address both. For a prototype on a product standpoint, what you could do is you can, first of all, if you're doing clothing or fashion, you could go to American manufacturers and ask them to help do some samples that you want, and at a much lower minimum order quantities. It's way more expensive on a per unit basis, but overall you're ordering less, so you'll spend less money. And then you can, use those prototypes and test them out on a limited scale with a few people, and maybe tweak your sizing, tweak your colors or whatever. That's one route. Also, for if you want to build a prototype, you can be really scrappy and go to a seamstress or somebody, I don't know what you want to build, but if you're going to do shoes, then you go to a cobbler and you say, can you make me one prototype of this? I will help you get the materials. You can be very scrappy in how you come up with a prototype. For the software side, and what I saw happen at Merlon, because I was there from the very very early days, is that we did a proof of concept. So the engineers worked with the business side of the company, and they we came up with an MVP. We defined business requirements, and the engineers built the MVP and had it work enough that potential clients could see how the software works. But the underlying models weren't actually machine learning models. They were just not machine. They weren't yet artificial intelligence. Once we got enough client interest and once we worked through enough, we identified enough features that clients wanted, then we went to build the actual product itself that was machine learning driven. But this, like, whether you're doing a physical product or whether you're doing a technology product, building a company, building the product itself, sure, is obviously one of the most important things, but it is not everything. So we address, we have the 3 Ps, and this is very simplistic again, but there's product, people, and process. Product, we just went over about how you go about building it. People, can anyone guess what I mean by people? You can just type it into the chat. The different types of people that you could work with when building a company. It's good. Great, that's great. Perfect. Yep, I mean, you guys are all right here. Of course, you want your team. So meaning your employees, or sometimes you work with some like independent contractors, for example. But you also do want to know about who your vendors are. So of course, manufacturers are a gigantic one of that, a gigantic and extremely important vendor for consumer product companies. For technology companies, a lot of technology companies outsource development to third-party developers, like overseas, for example. That would be a huge vendor to think about. You have to also think about like the very operational, tactical vendors, like who's gonna be your bank, your business bank, who is going to do, let me think of who's gonna build your website. All of those kinds of things are really important. I like partnerships is great. Partnerships is actually a great one if you need partners to go to market. So for example, my boyfriend, he works at a healthcare company and they do telemedicine. And some of their most important partners are hospitals, because they help do telemedicine for the hospital's patients. So that would be a great one. Like hospitals would be in there. And then investors, yes, which is also my favorite non-big P, which is funding. Investors are something that I think right now, especially because of COVID, to Phoebe's point, there are a lot of companies who require outside investment to start. Softwares is a big one. I think that this is my personal opinion. I think that not all companies, your default shouldn't be to raise outside capital. I think that there are a lot of companies who would actually be better off if they didn't have outside investors. And I'm talking about companies like OCO, consumer product companies that have to build brands. Brand building is it takes a long time, because you have to get in enough eyeballs. Like those people need to see you enough where they trust you and continue to go to your product, to buy your product. And then they have to tell their friends, and it's a very slow growth compared to a software company where you can experience hockey stick or very quick growth. But that's not to say that you shouldn't get investors if you want to do consumer product company. I think that they are like a very important stakeholder group, especially if you need to get outside capital. But you guys are all in your early stages, so I encourage you to think of other ways, especially if you're doing a D2C company that sells a physical product. Think about other ways of funding, which I'll get to in a second. And then processes. So the final P is process. This is also pretty expansive, but process can be anything from how you get how you get product, your inventory from your manufacturers to wherever you are. I'm in New York City, so I send it to New York City to your customers. That's one. Your fulfillment process. That's one. I should say supply chain and fulfillment process. That's one process. Another process you probably would never think about, but like how do you file taxes? How do you create financial reporting and management reporting so you can monitor the financial and operational health of your business and make sure that you're not, losing a bunch of money, or that where you are spending money, it's going to the most effective and efficient place. That's another process to think about. A ton of things. Processes are how all of the different things in your company come together, and how frequently they are coming together. Another process that's probably some of you actually might know of is performance review process. So from an HR perspective, if you have employees, you want to make sure that they feel that they are given an environment to grow professionally and personally. So you want to make sure you're giving them feedback and they feel supported. That's also a critical process. Okay, so now the 3 Ps, and we're going to go to also another thing that's very important when you build, and I mentioned it before, is funding. There are a variety of ways that you can get funding for your business at a very early stage. I said that, big software companies might want to go to VC firms, venture capital firms, I should say, to get outside capital. You can raise friends and family money. Those people tend to be very friendly and usually invest in the business not because of your idea or your service, but because of you. And they are usually the earliest investors. I had a very small friends and family round to finance our initial inventory orders, although since then I'm self-funding our business. But that really helped it from the beginning. As women, particularly a ton of you are in STEM, there are a ton of grants out there, a ton. You could just, there's actually one that I call it's Women's Grant. I'm gonna type it here. Women's Grant Network, they give out a $10,000 grant every month to a female-founded business, and you could be very, very early stage and not even, have a product yet built. There's a ton of money that I would implore you to look at those alternative funding sources too. Especially for those of you who are an undergrad, your university usually has some kind of entrepreneurial fund that they give out money to every budding entrepreneurs on campus every year. I know that Wharton had a pretty substantial one for undergrads. Georgetown is building theirs, but some schools are better than others. So, but money is important for the beginning. I don't think it's the end all be all. As entrepreneurs, we are scrappy as hell, and so you'll figure out a way to fund your project. You will figure out a way to fund your project or to fund a business. And Shreya, at a very young age, I don't even remember, to be honest, I don't even remember what I said that in context to. I think I was talking about undergrads at the earliest, but high schoolers too, there's a ton of grant money out there for you guys as well. You could also go to your school. If you're in high school, you can also go to your school and ask them to sponsor a project. I know I have one of my cousins did that and was wildly successful. We just can't be afraid, to ask. Okay. And that actually leads me to the next point and this is like, way down the line. The fourth piece of this framework is about scaling. In complete honesty, Oko has been in business for 2 years now, and I think we're just reaching to the point where I'm ready to say, like, okay, I want to pump up my resources and start to scale this business in a bigger way. For Oko, when I say scale, I mean that I'm going to expand our product line. I'm going to start investing in full-time employees. I'm going to look at non-US markets to sell our products in, because right now we're so heavily US focused. But I right now am going through the thought process of how exactly do we scale and how do I scale smartly so that I can continue the successes that I've had to date in other areas, different product categories, different geographies, etc. One thing that I did learn from business school, which was very helpful, was that you don't want to scale for scaling's sake. You don't want to scale to say that I grew my business 10x because it's the right thing to do, or because you think it's the right thing to do, or because an investor is pushing you to do it. You want to make sure that you have a good foundation. So the foundational stuff we just talked about in the build portion, the people, processes, product, before you go to scale. You want to make sure that your economics look good, so that you're making, you might not be profitable yet, so you might be spending more than you're bringing in, and that's okay. A lot of startups are not profitable from the outset, but you want to make sure that you have a path to profitability, because if you scale when you're unprofitable and you have no way of reversing that and becoming profitable, you will continue to lose money, and then you just won't be able to have a sustainable business. You'll continue to need to bring outside capital to make up those funding gaps. Another great thing to think about when going to scale is your own appetite for scaling. Like, are you as an executive ready to be the one to grow your business to the next level, or do you think that you need to bring in somebody to either complement your skill set or replace you, to take the company to the next stage? And then finally, I can't emphasize this enough about product market fit. Is everyone here familiar with WeWork? Just you could nod your head yes or no. Okay, so I think that, so WeWork is a company that they basically rent out office space. It's a co-working space. So they have several companies working in one location, and each company can either, rent out a desk or rent out a big office. And it really disrupted the commercial real estate market, because now, companies didn't really have to worry about getting a lease with the landlord or with the building and building everything out. WeWork did all of that upfront work for you and put out bought the desks, bought the Wi-Fi, all of that, had really yummy snacks. And the company would just pay a fee, or the person would just pay a fee for a desk or a room. But WeWork, I think that part of their business model was really well, but then they started going into some pretty, how do I say it, tangential business lines that weren't related to their core competency. And I think that it actually brought down the company. It's my personal opinion that brought down the company. They were supposed to go public this year. They didn't go public for a variety of reasons, most notably that they were kind of lied to investors about their financials. And then when they tried to go public, everyone saw their real information and then freaked out a little bit. But you just want to make sure that WeWork scaled probably way too quickly. They took on all these leases on behalf of their clients and didn't have the occupancy to sustain their business. In addition, they were going into new products, or I should say new services, for which there was no demand, and it kind of blew up in their face. And I'm sure COVID isn't helping. So just something to think about. You could see a lot of companies in the news who might not do this well, and you could see some companies in the news that really do it well, but you want to make sure that you have that product market fit before you scale. And then we went over scales. And then, but if you did it, I know I spoke a lot. I know we only have 10 more minutes and I want to get to some questions. If you have to remember anything from this presentation, it's this quote. I said, it's from Jonah Lear. It says, grit is often the single most predictor of entrepreneurial success. So, and I don't know if you guys know what grit is, but grit is, I would like to sum it up as persistence. It's that willingness to keep going and going, and be almost relentless in your resolve to accomplish a goal. And if you fail, you figure out another path to accomplish your goal. And I think personally, from the entrepreneurs I know firsthand from my own network, as well as successful entrepreneurs that I admire, they all have this grit. And I think if you are willing to put in the work, you're willing to put in the time, you're willing to do all of, continuously brainstorm ideas for a business, you're willing to put the analysis and the legwork in to see if the idea is truly feasible. You put in the work to build up a company, and then you put up the work to scale a company. And if you have grit along all the time, you will be successful. Maybe not on your first venture. We'll see with Oko and me, but definitely on your second or third. Yeah, and that is it. Questions. I know that you guys, Sandra asks, how did COVID impact your brand and impact your business positively, negatively? How would you address these issues? Um, so COVID, uh, at first, it was very uncertain how it would impact my business. And when I say at first, I meant in November, in March, when New York City's lockdown first came in place. That was a scary time for us generally because we had no idea what was going on. As I mentioned before, OGO is both wholesale and direct to consumer. At the beginning of this year, I was 50% wholesale and 50% direct to consumer. And when the lockdowns across the country went in place, a lot of my whole retail partners shut down. Some of them actually closed for good. So my wholesale business dried up. That was 50% of my sales. I was freaking out. However, on the direct to consumer side, we grew substantially. From March, I think between March and now, our sales grew like 5x, so 5 times. It's been like I'm incredibly grateful about um, how well we've been doing on the direct to consumer side. I think in part that success is driven by the fact that we are a comfort product, so it's still relevant when women are working from home. Most of the women are my customers are in their 20s through their 40s. We're reasonably priced, so it's uncertain economic times. Women can still get comfort and get a nice product for $40 for our bra, for example, or $14 for our underwear. It won't kill you or break the bank. Um, and we're all online, so we're very accessible all the time, and everyone now is in front of their computer. um, One thing that I have to say that is very challenging right now is, as I mentioned, I'm trying to develop new products outside of our core collection, and I work with only overseas suppliers, and the process has doubled in time. What I thought would take 6 months is now going to take me a year, simply because the factory, like, people have to be 6 feet apart, even though they're outside of the U.S. or Colombia. But yeah, they have to be 6 feet apart, so they simply cannot produce stuff as quickly. Getting samples back and forth, we now have to mail them, and that takes forever. And customs is all backed up because they are prioritizing essential equipment. Uh, okay. Is it necessary to earn an MBA to become an entrepreneur? How did your MBA? No. I actually, I'll tell you this through an anecdote. So when I was at Merlon, our CEO was named Bradford Cross, and he had his own startup that was eventually acquired by LinkedIn. He also worked at Google as one of their machine learning engineers. He was not a business guy at all. He was an engineering genius. When I told him I went to Wharton, he said, he laughed in my face. He said, "You don't need to go to Wharton to start a business." I think he was a little harsh in that. I think an MBA helps you for reasons um, that are longer, that will come to fruition over the long term. So getting an MBA is great because you have an incredible network. That network can be investors, future employees, future co-founders. It's just an incredible network. I think that for me personally, because I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur from very early on, I got experience working at startups before my MBA. So I actually think that those experiences helped me become a smarter entrepreneur than actually going to class. But I wasn't very good at going to class because I was launching OGO at the time. So, but you guys should go to class. They don't make us take attendance in MBA. So. But yeah, I think it's if you're looking at MBA, I think you should definitely look into it if if it makes sense for you at the time. And if you don't have an idea yet, I found my idea at Wharton, and so that could be somewhere where you can start your business too. Oh, Sandra, I know I've been stuck in my apartment forever. I'm still stuck in here, it feels like. Jaden, how do you can you protect your product design so competitors do not copy it and sell it? So this is actually, there is, I right now don't have a patent on OGO's products. From my legal counsel, and please don't take this as legal advice because I'm not a lawyer, but it is very hard to protect fashion related apparel items, that those kinds of things from copyright infringement, um, unless it's very obvious, like the Nike swoop, for example. One thing that you can't, I mean, so one thing that you can do, and I actually was just talking to my friend about this, is that there is, even if you don't register, let's say, a brand name or a particular design with the trademark, or you don't patent it, if you use it and you're the first one to go to market with it, technically that means you have the rights to it. Um, it is like weird legal jargon. It is always something that I'm really worried about, especially when it comes to my branding and design side. We have this like face illustration that we use that is uniquely ours. I did it, but can be easily copied. But I haven't patented it. It's something that I really care about. For my for my product and where my company is right now, I'm not doing anything that's so innovative where I would file a patent. But Jaden, if you are doing something that's that innovative, definitely think about filing a patent. Another thing is that you can, whenever you have somebody come work for you, your employee, a vendor, etc., you should definitely have them sign a confidentiality agreement before working with you, before you give them any trade secrets. I mean, anything about your product, the design, anything about your brand. Don't send them dilly squat. Have them sign a confidentiality agreement. They're pretty standard. You probably could find one online. You definitely can find one through a lawyer. And so then if that person ever goes to another competitor or tries to start his or her own company and has signed that confidentiality agreement, you're protected. And you could come after them if they copy you. I'm 16 and okay. So I'm going to go to the next question because I know we have 4 minutes left. So Emma, I'm 16 and planning a commerce website under my parents' name. Do you have any tips on how to navigate taxes? My biggest tip is to find a tax advisor because I'm not one. And there are different kinds of taxes that you have. So sales tax, which are taxes charged on every transaction. I'm sure you guys bought a pack of gum before and got charged sales tax at the store. Sales tax, it does vary by jurisdiction and it varies by state and by product. My suggestion is I personally can't even navigate that for OCO stuff. Go to a tax advisor. Your parents actually use an accountant to file their annual income taxes. I would start there. And that's what I did. And then that person referred me to the right person to do my business taxes. Okay, Savani, I'm sorry, I'm going to start going a little quickly through these. Savani, I hear many stereotypes that are on the lines of, oh, if you want to start a business in a certain field, then you need experience in that field. For example, healthcare. Does somebody really need a whole degree related to science to start a business? I think it depends. My general answer is no. I never had fashion experience, or I would even say even more broad than that. I've never had to sell a product to a consumer before I started OCO. Didn't have this, and it's not like Wharton taught me how to sell underwear to women, you know. So I didn't really get I don't think that in general, as a general matter, you need to have experience in that field. I think that it helps for the simple reason that you will have a stronger network in that field and you'll have more credibility. But an easy way, if you want to start a business in healthcare, for example, and say you're the tech person or you're like, you know, the head engineer, is you find a co-founder or somebody second in charge with deep domain, as I say, or subject matter expertise who could help you along the way. And just make sure you sound smart when you go to potential customers and when you go to investors, all of that. I think as a general matter, experience at startups is helpful. It doesn't matter if it's in the end state field you want to end up in, but startups operate unlike any big company. It moves very quickly. There's always a million emergencies happening, and you want to be able to learn how to deal with those issues before you start your own company and put all of your own resources in your own company. So when in the process of building a business, should we start looking at the legal processes? Probably I would say, okay, in my 4 steps, so we have ideate, analyze, and build. Build is when you would set up the legal framework. You know, first work on your idea, see what your idea is, do all the market research and the data collection behind your idea and really refine it. And then once you're ready to start a company, you will need to incorporate as a business legally, and that's when you get a lawyer. And there are a ton of lawyers that work with startups, and they're relatively cheap because I know that startups don't have a lot of money. How did you grow your team and find the people to work with? I dated them. So I had a very bad experience with one team member, and we just kind of jumped into going into business together, and that was a mistake. We're fine now. We're just not in business anymore together. So what I do now is I date people. If there is somebody like my brand manager, for example, I gave her a very discreet project. I was launching a new color, and I needed her to help me get influencers for that color, for example. That was one of the things. And I gave her very specific deliverables to execute on. And then she ended up doing them really well. And then I hired her full time. So always try to get some kind of level of experience in a work environment with people you want to work with beforehand. If it's somebody below you, hire them as an intern. If they do really well over the internship, hire them as an employee. What age should I started thinking, should I even attempt starting a business in an oversaturated market? Yes. So going back to this, good ideas come from knowledge and need. They don't have to be, good ideas aren't necessarily the ones that are completely innovative and the first of their kind. I mean, Facebook wasn't. Facebook wasn't the first of its kind. Oko's not the first of its kind. And I think that there is room. Competition is good. Competition makes other companies better and products better for consumers. So don't worry about it too much. I do think you need to think of ways to differentiate. But that's when you think, you do your competitive analysis and see where you fit in the market. Shreya, at what age do you start thinking about growing your company? I started thinking about growing my company at age 2 because my mom also grew out a company. So I just knew that's what the path I wanted to take. But she started flower shops in downtown LA, very different from what I did. And do you need to take business at a minor or major in college? No, I don't. I think you could study whatever you want, become an expert in whatever field you want. One thing I will say though is take an accounting class. Accounting is extremely important in business. So you want to get that skill set and at least understand how it works, and then that's it. I think you're better off taking getting a healthcare degree, for example, or a fashion degree or design degree, and then taking business courses as supplements as needed or accounting as needed, than just going the pure business route. Oh, okay, Sandra, this is my last question, and I will say, Sandra asked, what does your daily life as an entrepreneur look like? It is crazy. It is so fun. It is so stressful. I am doing something different every single day, and I love it. But it's a lot of pressure because if something needs to get done, it's on me. So that's a lot of pressure, but I love it every single day. I think that I'm gonna go here now so you guys could all write down my email. I think that as an entrepreneur, I mean, what we read about entrepreneurs, they don't talk about the nitty gritty stuff, but there's a ton of nitty gritty things I have to do, tweaking our website, filing our taxes, all that kind of stuff that's not sexy or whatever. But then I get to do the really fun stuff like develop new product, which is great. Farah, don't kill me. I know we're at the end I'm 2 minutes over. But does anyone have, if anyone has any more questions, here's my email. I love talking to you guys. I'll write it in the chat too. I love talking to young women. I was in your spot before, and I will be happy to help you in any way that I can and connect you with people that I know who might also be able to help you in your journey if I can't directly. Okay, that's it.
Okay, Phoebe, thank you so much for this amazing workshop. I was able to learn so much about business and entrepreneurship.
Oh, no, thank you. This was so fun. Bye, everyone. Have a nice week.
Bye, everyone.